Welcome to the Wavelength podcast. We have a legend in the studio today. He is 18-year veteran, has landed over 150 money transmitter licenses, and we're going to be talking about the number one reason why crypto companies and entrepreneurs fail and why their businesses don't work out. Stay tuned on this. There's a lot of amazing nuggets, and I think you might learn something new today.
Scott Butler, welcome to the Wavelength show.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, excited to talk about, I think, a really hot topic right now. Bitcoin's coming back, crypto's coming back, but ultimately we're seeing a lot of repeated bad behavior or even just behavior that doesn't match long-term growth. I would love to go into your story, your history, your life, your business, the things that you've accomplished. It's really interesting. And then we're going to get into maybe I think there's a lot of answers to the number one reason. We'll get there, but there's lots of other reasons why crypto companies failed. And I think you are a major solution in brain on. But tell us a little bit about yourself. Nobody knows who is Scott Butler. If they don't know you already, tell them a little bit about your history and tell you who you are.
Yeah, so I am a compliance veteran of about 18 years or so, going back to New York City when compliance departments were first formed on Wall Street post September 11th. They were governed by the Bank Secrecy Act and the Patriot Act that had just passed in the wake of the terrorist attacks. And banks prior to that had been handling compliance, meaning anti-money laundering controls, transaction monitoring, customer onboarding through an attorney at the bank that was in charge of that.
Really?
Yeah. And so
Who was setting the standard for it back then?
it was still the Bank Secrecy Act and the various banking regulations and so forth that they had, but there was not the concentration on anti-financial crime that there is got it now. And of course, the terrorist attacks on September 11th drew that, it made that a priority of the banks, making sure that, if there was a correspondent bank that they were conducting business with, meaning like a bank of a bank, like that kind of relationship, making sure that they knew who those people were and making sure that that there weren't the people specifically linked to the terrorist financing or the weird proliferation. So
what got you into that too? So we go even a little bit before that. What gets you into even wanting to be a compliance person?
Oh, well, I did it. So that was the interesting part about it. So after that, I was operating a public access show, doing some writing on my own, had a collection of odd jobs. And then when September 11th actually happened, I was never in New York City. Yeah, living in the East Village. And so obviously that had a huge effect on the whole country and the whole city. And so when people were able to return to work after that, I said, okay, well, what is a good or quick way to perhaps help out or to something like that? And so I was concentrating on law enforcement, international relations, things like that. So through an agency, I got a temporary job at Credit Suisse, helping them get their.
You were writing before, creative writing.
Yes,
for scripts and film, and
Started writing stories, scripts. You started getting into this, doing research. Then you go into the banks just to catch back up where we were in the beginning.
For sure.
And then where does that lead you into then in some of the evolution of then you did Linden Labs, which I think is insanely interesting and disruptive to talk about that. You then get into Facebook. Share a little bit of that pipeline.
Around 2009, I decided to move to the West Coast, to Los Angeles, to be with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and I continue.
I'm glad that worked out.
Oh, thank you. Yes, yes, that makes two of us. Yeah, hopefully three of us. But let's see. But so I wanted to continue to pursue writing and was doing some financial crime, anti-money laundering consulting at the same time, and I got a call from from Facebook saying that they're starting a regulated payments business. The New York regulator had stopped their application because they needed someone with anti-money laundering experience, and they were wondering if I was available to interview.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, so I had just
was that a mind-blowing moment when you got that call?
Yeah, I was very excited and very curious
because they were like the pivotal moment in history of social network. Everything was about them for quite a while.
Well,
right?
yes. And at the time it was not just, an exciting phone call to get, but it was an unusual phone call to get, because now people kind of take it for granted that companies like Google or X or large fintech firms or Apple would get into finance. But at the time, it was really unusual to think Facebook to be pursuing payments licenses.
It's crazy because like it feels like even there's this whole joke that like there's Sky Pennies for Delta. It's not an airline company, it's a credit card company.
Yeah.
Now almost every one of these businesses are in finances in some way, offering a credit card, a debit card, holding money, transmitting money. It's so you get this call, and what's your gut? You're just like, yeah, sure.
I said, they said, could you be there on Thursday? And I just moved to Los Angeles, so in my mind, everything is a half hour away from everything else. So I quickly Google mapped it, and then I saw, oh, okay, this is like in Silicon Valley. This is, I don't know what I was thinking, but it was such an intriguing opportunity. I ended up flying there, and based on the feedback I received, there is, So in compliance, you're supposed to take a risk-based approach to each of your to any of the ecosystem that you're put in charge of. You're supposed to take this risk-based approach, which means you look at the specifics of how this platform operates, who the customers are, how the transactions work, what the purpose of the financial institution is. Is it to move money? Is it for people to hold money? And then you're supposed to apply controls based on that and based on the risks
to monitor it.
Exactly.
To slow it down and see to check in.
And just from having worked on Wall Street, this was not a surprise to me, but it turned out that most of the compliance professionals that they were interviewing were extremely rigid in their approach. They said, okay, well, the person needs to, if they want to send $2 to somebody else on Facebook, they need to supply their driver's license. They need to do
that's disruptive. That's slow it down. And tech people don't think that way. Tech people are like, what are you talking about? Just build the code and let them send the money and put it in. And there's all these rules, but the product doesn't think regulation.
I was one of the few candidates at the time. Now I think things have opened up a little bit, and people are more understanding of a fintech approach to payments and banking and so forth. But I think, one of the few people to say, okay, well, what kind of platform specific controls can be put in place? What makes not just what makes Facebook a risk and what do we need to clamp down on, but what's beneficial about someone transacting on Facebook versus another platform.
I got it.
And then thinking about,
I even think about the marketplace that they have now, which is more of an evolution. But like when they launched that was pretty disruptive for like Craigslist and even Amazon and anyone with local used goods. And then now like there's this whole like getting taxed on that, and there's stuff. This compliance, this regulation comes in stages.
Yes.
And I always wonder, like, who's getting the fees? Or are they getting fees? Or there's like a kind of a forgiveness thing to where, like, maybe the government's happy that it's happening somewhere, that they have someone working with them, more compliant. So I'd love for you to talk about that. But then, like, who did you get to work with? Were you working with product? Were you working with Mark or some of the executive team? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, initially I was working with the first person who was put in charge of Facebook payments was Ben Duransky, who's a compliance officer, lawyer, also has experience with virtual worlds and so forth, and so he takes credit for gets credit for shaping that initial
cool.
department, and then I was in charge of developing the initial controls there. And so at the time, sort of like you said, we were part of Facebook Payments Inc. So it's like a startup within this giant Facebook, within this giant ecosystem, which is a unique perspective to have, to feel like you're bootstrapped, but then also have the comfort of being inside this this already successful place. So initially we were we were very much part of the product process. Payments on Messenger was the signature product that I got to work on from
cool.
initiation to release, and was it was everybody from the marketing team to engineers, of course, to attorneys and everybody, and it was interesting to see how that came together.
And they moved pretty fast, right? I mean,
oh yes,
for a big organization, they were getting that stuff out fast.
Yeah. The vision, I think, was always, as you could see from the evolution of, Facebook credits initially being a currency that was within the, sort of a closed loop currency, like what we would now call a side chain. Yeah. Inside of Facebook.
A centralized side chain.
A centralized side chain, yes.
Which in the gaming world, that's like coins. There's usually like a primary, like gold and coins.
Yeah.
And a secondary, like inside game economies, which are closed loop ecosystems.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so
you've done this many times now.
Yes.
You've done this for multiple companies, some of the biggest companies in the world.
Mm.
You've powered millions and millions of people to transact, if not potentially billions, from setting something and making it come alive in the world. And then you went into Linden Labs. You did the same thing with them too, right? But theirs actually had a currency.
Yes. Yeah. So that was the idea behind the formation of the payments entity associated with Second Life, is that they had the Linden dollar was an internal currency, again, closed loop. You would consider it a closed loop currency. Fluctuating though. I mean, there is a Linden exchange and the dollar.
Disruptive.
Yeah. And it would, so it would have a different value. I mean, there were people that, within the world
arbitrage,
that there was some arbitrage.
Having people building bots to collect it in the game and then selling it, right? This is a whole world of World of Warcraft, RuneScape.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Like this is a world of in-game currency and assets and money.
And then in terms of speaking of that arbitrage, so there was a population of people who would go into Second Life, purchase the Linden dollar currency, and then sell it externally on these sort of gray market exchanges. There's no such thing as a regulated crypto exchange then, but
send me dollars and I hope that you'll give me that currency that I bought.
Yes. Yeah. And the Linden dollar would be traded even though the Linden dollar, the nature of it was closed loop and quite different than Bitcoin and e-gold, it was traded alongside those on the exchange. So you would forgive certainly
some fluctuating value.
That
is crazy. But that's when people come in and they're washing money.
Yes.
They're doing drug things. They're doing this thing.
Yeah.
They're turning it into real dollars. And then what do they come to you and say, hey, we need help?
Yeah, there were consultants that they had hired to try to figure out how to solve the problem, including an external counsel and a law firm that I had known. And he had said he had seen, because at Facebook, I think that as Facebook grew larger, the compliance team became a little bit more divorced, I feel like, from the product team. And so the attorney that I'd been working with at the time said, well, there's another interesting thing happening over at Linden Lab and Second Life.
A theory with you, though, is like you get things started, you set it off, and then when it gets too bureaucratic, whatever it is, and less bureaucratic, when success happens, you're like, awesome, I'm on to the next. You like startup world.
Yeah, I definitely do. Yeah.
Chaos, right? Once it's structured and it's healthy, you're like, I did my work.
Yeah, I feel like I enjoy bringing order to that chaos.
Yeah.
And so that is essentially what happened at Linden Lab, trying to figure out like, okay, well, we had to say we had to basically reassure the team that started this payments entity, some of whom are still working with me now, had to say, when you're presenting ourselves externally, like, okay, well, this is, everything that happens with this with the Linden dollar inside Second Life, like we have an idea of how these people are behaving, how the transactions are taking place, and it is part of the normal day-to-day life within that world.
There's a threshold, stuff over this amount you have to be more aware of.
Yeah, and further that no Linden dollar could exit the system for USD, for any fiat currency, until we had performed the requisite compliance checks, made sure that the
buying and the selling side were identified as human beings.
Yes, exactly.
We're on a sanctions list. the whole processes and procedures.
Exactly. Yeah. And also to say like, okay, everything that led up to this, cash out, so to speak. I mean, you're very careful not to say cash out when you're doing with regulars, but this refund mechanism or whatever you want to, however you want to refer to it, everything that happened up until then was kosher, expected, we know what we want to do. And the challenge,
and
of
going
course,
back to what you said earlier, it was all being done with the intention of why it was created, which was to play a video game.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
why you're playing it. You get the lending dollars, you buy them, you buy a skin, you get access to special content.
Yeah, and to create in the world, build things that, much like being out in at Burning Man, build things that hadn't previously existed except in a digital world. So some of the transactions that we had to justify were quite bizarre, of course, and having to.
Why does this person want this monument in this virtual world? What value does it create to them? To a normal person, that would make no sense.
Yes.
But to hardcore gamers and creators and builders,
and explaining why that happened.
It's actually what makes life special.
That's
why I think real gamers, like when you don't own your stuff, you don't own your identity of where you spend your time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And then you do this. So keep going.
Oh no, I was just saying like, and also the personal interactions there too. So there was, so the Linden dollar was, not just this closed loop currency, but it was a way to, express support for a project that you like. You would
those
send
early Twitch, donators.
Donators.
Whoa,
There would be performers.
Fortnite right now. That's happening everywhere. Like support a creator. Keep seeing the same unconscious behaviors from like you saw altcoins and ICOs go hot, and you saw NFT projects basically do the same thing but act like they're individual, non-fungible, and then fungible. Okay, then now we're seeing it again with the Bitcoin rush and all the L2s there, and it just keeps re-happening where people are like just trying to surface and do low-level money grabs instead of actually provide real value. So you've got a wild take in your approach to compliance and that disruption you bring with your art in that field of business. My question, I know we sat down in San Francisco. I thought that you had an amazing answer. Like, what is your dream state for what you want Providence Technologies, for what you want Forte to put into the world in the future in the next 5 to 10 years?
Part of that is part of what my dream state of what I'd like to put into the world is it goes hand in hand with our rebranding that we're doing now. So Providence Technologies Inc. was kind of a functional name that we used just when we were pursuing our licenses before we ever thought that we would be presenting ourselves externally. But we're rebranding as Fiant, which the idea behind that is that we are Fiant so that our clients can be defiant. So Fiant isn't necessarily a real word, in the same way people say that, use the term disgruntled. Like you rarely say, oh, I'm feeling really gruntled today. So it's the same kind of thing with Fiant, where we say, okay, being defiant means being an iconoclast, pushing the envelope, breaking the rules, trying something new, staking a claim in new territory. And all of that is fine if it doesn't involve money or it doesn't involve regulated transactions. If it involves regulated transactions, you need someone who is Fiant or Fiant itself, who in order to be defiant. Yeah, exactly.
And the concept of defiant isn't a negative term. It's like, look, sometimes you have to be defiant to something where you want progression, where you want innovation. So long as it's legal, and Fiant is the way to get there, is the idea. Yeah,
certainly. All financial technology, I think, that we're used to is defiant at some point. The credit card was a defiant innovation at some point, and all different kinds of financial innovations were as well. So, but I think you do want to have that regulated infrastructure piece if you're performing regulated activity or if you have regulated transactions, to have that internal structure that where when licenses are required, when customer disclosures are required, when consumer funds are it's necessary to protect them, to make sure that is in place so that if you are an innovator or a builder, you can go out and build whatever you want, realizing that
the safe way to do it.
Exactly.
And right now, getting money into crypto, this is what I think your company has done amazingly and done a great job. I want to highlight something though that you did say, because you snapshotted it here, but I still thought it was really cool. We were together. You said, I want to have, and it was you and your team said, I want to have a seat at the table to help the regulators and help the world. move innovative products forward.
Yes.
Having a seat to influence the global thought process and how this should happen, because there is a lot of lack of knowledge in some of that space, or a way to think about it that's actually helpful on both sides.
Yeah, going back to Facebook, even in the pursuit of those money transmitter licenses, like the idea that and someone's identity on Facebook via their Facebook profile and their publicly facing Facebook profile, not even anything anybody would potentially see behind the scenes, knowing that is like tells a financial regulator more about somebody's identity, or is a more reliable marker of somebody's identity than perhaps a digital copy of a driver's license would be, which could be faked or stolen or something like that. And it's the same thing with having regulated fiat to crypto rails that you have, explaining to regulators why this is, why this can be done safely, what the value of it is, that the alternative to what we're doing are the gray markets that exist, where if we're talking using games as an example, neither the game developer nor the game player has any kind of security or control over what's happening. They're just taking in faith of the object they're buying.
I actually think that some of the stuff you're doing right now creates a space where, as you pull off what you pull off, it enables commerce, and it actually creates better trust. I think the purpose of business, as it moves from more unconscious to conscious, is people talk about the world being in a worse place right now. It's actually at a better place than ever, because the spread of information and the access to information and the ability to validate that information. And so now, even in business, it used to be so easy to scam people back then. Now there's tracks and records of everything, and there's social value, and there's like social karma points that people can kind of pick up. And I feel like where and what you're pulling off is going to pull the next iteration of true ownership, true validation, the ability for people to commerce in a trusted way across lots of platforms, the ability to get access to capital, the ability to get access to being banked. All of these things happen with having fluid, flexible models that reflect outcomes that are moving people towards each other.
Yes. Yeah.
Commerce.
And taking a risk-based approach when in that effort, in the sense of understanding what transactions people are trying to execute, why they're doing it, and maybe when it comes to identity or validation, reputation might be a more reliable indicator of whether a platform should transact with somebody versus, the traditional identification elements that are collected, things like that.
Okay, yeah. I just connected that dot. It's not so much what's your soc, it's show us some type of social validation. Log in with your Facebook and verify that you joined here, and they've got all this other data they can share. Yeah,
that sometimes that can be more beneficial, I think, or certainly more
telling.
Yeah, more telling. Yeah, than simply going through a process of supplying your ID or answering some credit questions like where did you on which street was your apartment?
I just got asked these questions on an application yesterday.
Yeah, exactly.
So they ask you what's your car and whether that's you or not. I want to kind of pivot to a few other things, really fun things, but you do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yes. Yeah.
Talk about that. But how does that make you a better CEO? How does that make you a better human?
Well, I think, one, having a young kids and a young family, it's like the perfect stress release. Like there's, the exhaustion sets in after you're, rolling and grappling with people that, that make you much calmer throughout the rest of the day. So there's that piece that helps. But Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I mean, I could sort of go on for a long time. There's like a meme where there's people at a funeral and the casket is getting lowered into the ground. They say, does anybody have any last words? And then there's a pause, and then the person says, I trained jiu-jitsu, because it's something that people, like to talk about all the time. So I will spare everybody that, except to say that the most interesting thing, or one of the more interesting things about jiu-jitsu, is that it's known as a gentle art, meaning like you are not supposed to exert a lot of effort when you're trying to escape a tough situation or overpower an opponent or gain control over somebody from a grappling perspective. And that truly is the case. You're using, tension momentum,
weight,
leverage, all of those kind of things to sort of overpower an opponent. And so I think, as I've trained more and more, you start to realize like some of those that aspect of jujitsu bleeds into your regular life where you're thinking like, okay, well, if you're under pressure, and there's some things, no matter how long you've trained, if you're grappling against somebody who outweighs you by a great deal, and
well, your point though, it'll change the strategy. Do you lean in? Do you lean out? Do you go on your back foot, let momentum?
Yeah, exactly. The one thing you never do is, or that you don't want to place any rules on things, but I'm comfortable saying the one thing you never do is panic. You never, whether somebody's on top of you trying to choke you or on top of you smothering you, just keep your elbows in tight in your frames and then think about what to do next. Yeah. Wow. And every time somebody makes a move, they're opening themselves up to a corresponding move.
Definite way of how it makes you a better CEO, because you are often having to just kind of, it's fluid. You're having to move things around. You're having to pivot. You're having to, especially in startup world.
Dealing with products, dealing with regulators. Like there's all kinds of people with, as you undoubtedly know, when it comes to dealing with products, or if there's people that want to, move fast and break things. There's people that want to build something and then they don't like what they built and they trash it and they build again, and thinking of when to step in, how to handle that. Regulators are regulators who are very strict. The only thing they care about is whether you've crossed your T and used a semicolon properly. And then there's other ones that really want to like get to know your business.
The safest way to launch your product is not to launch it if you're a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly.
Zero risk is the best risk.
Yeah, so that's definitely where it's come in. Thinking of it as like and also think of it as like a gentle art, like you said, like I had mentioned before, where you're not using whatever skill you have to overpower somebody. You're persuading them with leverage or
I like that.
Something else.
I want to talk about our partnership.
Yes.
I'm really proud of it. And I know you are as well. I know that there's a lot of amazing things that your company's working on. Getting to meet your staff has been incredible. You guys have to have people 24/7 monitoring everything. You've got all these unique brains. You've brought this group of people together, uniting under something that doesn't look like sexy, right? But you're the ones that are powering and partnering the tough work so that other people can do that creative work. And I really feel like Hypermarket and Fiant, it's very cool. I think I've said Forte a few times on accident.
Yeah.
Fiant, it's like what we're going to pull off together in this next iteration it's the most exciting company and product that I've ever been able to launch. So I'm excited about that. Let's talk about the partnership for a minute. And it's funny how we met. We met because you wrote something. Yeah. And it was a blog, a press release, and it was an amazingly written one. And I'm like, I gotta contact this.
Oh, thanks. Person. Yeah. It was just a blog for our website explaining why we are interested in providing these regulated services for games. And
you're one of 11 companies, right?
That have a bit like I'm not exactly sure what the roster is now, but one of the very few companies that
47 money transmitter licenses, the bit license, all these other layers of like licensing at the New York level.
And in Canada, Canadian registration as well.
And that stood out because it's like the other companies that have that it's like Robinhood and
we're definitely the smallest. That is for sure.
They're all the juggernauts, but it's like there's a lot of money if you can facilitate high quality services and great experiences. One of which is going to be powering digital sellers.
Yes.
So tell us what got you excited about Hypermarket and this digital platform.
Well, I was very excited. As soon as I met you and Josh, I knew that it was going to be a fruitful partnership because you're both very enthusiastic, very sincere about what you wanted to do, which is basically, empower sellers of any kind and at the same time give customers the reassurance that that they're transacting safely, and creating a technology where people are able to transact directly with each other, removing a platform in a traditional sense from the equation.
The most trusted place to do commerce would be a great dream state.
Yeah,
right?
That would be and that would be amazing, and it'd be easy for people to sign up for sellers of all different levels. Yep. And so I thought that was really compelling. That certainly is what attracted me to the original project of StarCard, which then became Forte and
It's cool how
so
the
forth.
universe pulls that back through.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Thinking about like, okay, well, there is, you know, there are all of these like centralized authorities trying to, you know, that are governing this commerce now. So people are, you know, either going outside of that or living joylessly within that world, and so so figuring out a way to, you know, remove that platform aspect, but then also have people still feel safe to transact and to send money or value is a pretty amazing thing. And I think, you know, I'm very excited to see how this next year turns out.
Me too. I think that when I look at it, I feel like in many ways you can say that this is a historic moment for crypto, for blockchain, for digital assets, where most of the time on most platforms, best use is you buy something and the only thing you can do with it is sell it, which is very tulipy.
Yeah.
Unless the person launches a platform and does some special use. So I feel like what we're about to do for like podcasters, for individuals who have an e-course, digital products, it's so disruptive to have a verifiable object, an asset that grants you exclusive access to something or an experience, or even just a ledger of knowing the experiences you've had already. I'm really pumped about it. And I think that there's no better partner out there. So how can people get to find you, talk to your company, work with you guys? You want to share a little bit about how people can contact you?
Yeah, we'll have an entirely new website, Fiant.io, and all of our contact information will be there. We'll have new social media handles, and our goal and our purpose for being is still to be this background role, still to be the regulated infrastructure for these innovative projects, but we'll also be putting ourselves out there a little bit more to find places where we can help. Yep. And so you probably will expect to see us a lot more prominently now, but certainly Fiant.io is a great place to start. And then, all of the social media will be in there, and I'll be, certainly keeping having that be a destination point for keeping people up to date on relevant regulatory developments, relevant developments within the industry, and taking it from there.
Cool. Very cool. And you're on LinkedIn, Scott Butler.
Yes.
Thanks for coming on the Wavelength. This was super fun. I have so many more questions. I feel like we got to like 6 of the 18 that I have.
Oh, good.
But as always, just excited for the future, excited to have, for me, I think there's entire worlds of people and products of people that surprise and delight and have great experiences. And if we want to move that evolutionary to a new layer, I think Fiant is a solution that it's cool. I feel like I'm sitting down with someone who's literally about to pave the next path of the next. It's a major movement at the end of the day that's going to power this. So thanks for what you've done. I know there's a lot of hard days being a startup CEO, a lot of hard moments, but you keep going on, and then you come home, you do jujitsu, and then you talk to your kids, and you're living life. And I honor that investment in this world because it really is going to make a major difference.
And thank you. Yeah. And meeting people like you and Josh is certainly inspirational for me. So I appreciate that. And I'm just as enthusiastic about hypermarket as well. So
amazing. All right. Well, thank you again for joining us on the Wavelength podcast. We'll have links to Scott, to Fiant. We'll have some links about hypermarket so you can learn a little bit about more of that because we don't talk a ton about it. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you.